The food service, hospitality, and retail industries are evolving in ways you've never heard of until now. Hosted by global industry technovator Rob Grimes and powered by the IFBTA, Tech Bites is your go-to podcast, putting technology innovation and trends on the menu.
So Rob Grimes with the IFBTA and the Tech Bites podcast. And this is a special edition since we get the opportunity to see a lot of old friends and new friends as well on the floor of the FS Tech Show 2024. And I have the opportunity today to speak with an old friend and have a conversation, sort of catch up. So we're just going to do it on air. But John Doyle, who is the CIO of the Fiesta restaurant group, and actually you're here in Dallas, so this was a short drive.
That's right.
So welcome to Tech Bites.
Thank you.
So we're done. Thank you. So we are here at FS Tech. And how many FS Techs have you been to?
I don't know the count. I started in 1999. I missed 1 year that I know of that FS Tech occurred.
Why'd you miss?
It was 2009, Great Recession, budget belt tightening.
And FS Tech in 2009 was probably in some other part of the country. It probably wasn't here in Dallas.
Oh,
you might not have been in Dallas, right? Of course not. So I'm not even thinking about that. Well, okay. So, I once did a panel at FS Tech many years ago, and we had a lady who was the CIO at Burger King at the time. And she said she had left the industry for 10 years and she came back and nothing had changed. So since 1999, what are the major changes that you've actually seen as we sit here in the birthplace of FS Tech, because the first one was in Dallas, and we're in Dallas? What have you seen?
Well, I definitely wouldn't say nothing's changed. If you turn the clock back to the 90s, things were pretty rudimentary, right? Windows 95 PCs, maybe you had modems to pull sales and data and labor data to your corporate office. Maybe you had a very early inventory system. Since then, there's just been, every year, there's more and more technology that steps into.
So maybe you had Remax, which was the, it wasn't the Excel spreadsheet. It was the, what's the spreadsheet before Excel? Yeah, I used to say it was the whatever of restaurant back office systems.
All right.
I got to remember what it was, but it was before. No, it was. But you're talking about, inventory ordering. There's a number of different things like that. But yeah, you would have had the early things that were out there. And I guess if we think about the systems that were here, very rudimentary as well, right? So you basically probably have point of sale, back office, kitchen printers, probably not necessarily displays, right? Kitchen printers, I think.
Yeah, I'll date myself here and say something that won't make any sense to younger viewers. But
we got to talk about non-resettable grand totals? I don't know. What are we talking about?
When I started with Ruby Tuesday in 2000, our back office...
And that's where we first met, right?
That's right. Our back office system was a DOS batch file that was 168 pages. And then it had a couple of Visual Basic 2.0 forms laid over top of it so the managers could click buttons, and Crystal Reports, I think version 1.0.
Crystal Reports, there you go.
What was not the Access database? There was Microsoft had a lesser database called Jet.
Yeah.
You remember Jet?
Well, not really, because I'm not a technical guy.
So anyway, we've come a long way. Continually, there's technologies being leveraged in new ways in the restaurant
Lotus
business,
1, 2, 3.
which is very good.
It was the Lotus 1, 2, 3. Sorry, but back off. So anyway, sorry.
So as technology goes into each one of these areas, it's amazing because these new opportunities to either drive sales or leverage margins are introduced. The flip side of that is technology becomes more and more business critical to the business. Back in the day when you first installed the point of sale system, if the point of sale system crashed, everybody knew how to revert to handwritten tickets. Today, if you have a critical system go down, your restaurant's dead in the water.
They used to have the little cigar box backup system,
That's right. Yeah, and a manual style credit card imprinter.
Right. But also what we're talking about here is a major change, of what's happened is in those days, most of your systems, were on-prem, and they might have been, master-slave relationship, even before they went to independent terminals. Because I'm now thinking back to when companies like Micros got their start, and they were one of the, few true independent, POS systems out there. And today, there's probably hardly a system that's in this room that isn't somehow cloud-based. Which is totally different, right?
Right.
So okay, so the technology has changed, but also you've mentioned this, the adoption rate by the operators has changed too. Because if you had franchisees, then in trying to convince them to make the spend in that or an oven or fryer, you might have had a problem. But today, I don't think anybody argues that, right?
Right. Well, and not just franchisees and operators in general, but customers customers had to get to a point where they were ready to place an order on their phone, right?
Right. Well, let's
place an order at a kiosk.
Well, they were sort of testing some of those things out. Maybe not so much kiosk. I mean, that might have been a few years later, because I remember some of the early kiosks that came out. McDonald's was doing some things with those. And Ruby Tuesdays wouldn't have been doing that kind of thing because that was a full-service restaurant. So that would be a little bit different. But there's certainly a number of things that changed. So what else, so if we look at change, we look at the technology. So let's just sort of start there. So you already brought up the subject of the infrastructure and the backbone. So the difference between today and then in the backbone are also the operating systems and the variety of things that are there, and you don't really code anymore, do you?
We're less coding, yeah, more integrating, less coding.
Right, more integrating, less coding, and the concept of needing to have crystal reports probably isn't really there either.
Right.
I mean, I guess you have some business analytics tools, but those are packaged products too.
Right, yeah, we've got more sophisticated BI tools.
Okay, so the other types of things, I guess, is I think, about what's in this room. A lot of these companies wouldn't have been around 10, 15 years ago at all. So what are the things in the last 10 years that suddenly are here that if we were able to do the Wayback Machine or pull out a program which were printed way back, right? What is it that we would not see that we would see now?
Right. Well, I mean, the online ordering platforms were already coming online 10 years ago, but in terms of what's happened with them and growth and adoption.
Online ordering might have been, but delivery might not have.
Right. Well, and their ability to be a kind of a comprehensive platform that can offer up a mobile experience to place an order, can offer up a web-based experience to place an order that's integrated into your company website, right, that is can aggregate from multiple delivery service providers.
Right. Well, that's changed in the last few years.
Can integrate with a catering service. Their maturity has come a long way. I mean, obviously, if you look at the last 5 years and put aside the impact of what COVID's done to everybody's business and turning things upside down, obviously AI is a bigger and bigger play here every year, and it's got applications in all kinds of areas, whether you're talking about BI or you're talking about automation and eliminating positions needed to do things manually.
But I'd venture to say that, and everybody always brings up AI, and it's interesting because I can look around this room, in the limited space that we're in right now, I don't see the word AI in the booths, and that to me is telling, because where we think that people are talking about AI, and they certainly talk about it in the industry, it's on television and everything else. All right, actionable AI insights is right across the way here. Okay, I do. Actually, I love that because I define AI as not artificial intelligence, but actionable insights or actionable information, right? So if we take that, are we really talking about something new? Because we have machine-based learning, rules-based systems that came out. We had big data and analytics. Those were other key terms. And so it's just another technology that's helping us to understand how to operate the business better and make suggestions.
Yeah, the game changer in my mind is voice AI and the potential for a brand like us in QSR to completely transform your staffing model at the drive-through. And I know there's plenty of companies that are pretty deeply into that already, and those like us that aren't yet are keeping our eye on the ball. And you can probably quote the stats better than I can, that every year how much the accuracy level on
voice AI is a huge thing. I think that perhaps it's going to be a bigger deal than we know, but maybe not for the reason that we think. So why do you think that voice AI is going to make, a large difference or be a game changer?
I think of it in terms of being able to take labor that's currently allocated to managing that task of interacting with consumers that are in their car placing the order and taking some margin savings on it, but primarily reallocating that labor to more consumer-facing roles?
Well, it's more consistent. You have language, things, certainly. There's a number of things. So I would tell you why I would say that I think it's a game changer. I do think it is a game changer for what you said. Plus, not that, people may or may not know how to read or something, but, you don't need to be able to read to use voice, right? So that works. And the language translation is actually on my phone. I can do real-time translation as I'm talking to you. You'll hear it one way on the phone, right? And that just came out in the latest model, CES this year, right? But the reason why I think it's going to make a difference is also in the workforce, because things like voice, we're going to see it more and more enabled for senior citizens. And people who have to work in their house, they can use their voice. They won't need to actually be able to turn things on and off. Well, I guess I think of the old commercial of, I've fallen and I can't get up, right? And you can't, you got to hit that button. That's exactly the point. I've fallen and I can't get up, right? And then, the lights call the emergency or something. But if you think about it, that is the universal thing. Kids learn how to talk before they learn how to write. Or even maybe we could debate, they might learn how to use a tablet before they'd learn how to talk. But it is a universal thing, right?
No, actually, it's a great point. And I'd say, to your point about senior citizens, that I think that's changed in the last 5 years. And a great example is my father is 95 years old. He's in a nursing home. He's blind. And my in-laws that passed away 10 years ago knew nothing about computers. My father knows how to say, "Hey, Siri, call John Doyle." So go figure.
Does he know who Siri is?
I think he does.
Okay. Well, of course, you could just change that up. He could just talk to you and you don't have to even be there. Put your voice on that. But I think that's where the game changer is. But let me just sort of put you on the spot with something. It's not really on the spot, but based in your experience. I'm not so sure everybody knows your journey and your history. But, so we met at Ruby Tuesdays when you were there, but you went to Sonic.
That's right.
And you were running Sonic. Now, when I think of Sonic, I think about, because they were one of the first, I think, to do some things, at least with voice ordering, the drive-thrus, and probably not AI, but I'm sure that they're doing that today. But you had the old voice ordering and things that were going on there. Do you see, when we talk about the drive-thrus and things, and we think about voice AI and that, how a company like Sonic or some of those types of things are going to, come about?
So first, just a correction, because at Sonic, I was one of a large group of executives running the technology, operations, marketing functions.
Sure.
And by no means can I take credit for everything that we did.
I didn't give you credit for it. I just said that you were working.
Running the show or something.
I didn't say you were running the show. I said that you were there and you were very involved. And that was one of the key technologies that I think they got it custom developed for them to be deployed.
Well, Sonic is a great business model that's different from any other restaurant. So if you don't know Sonic, it's a drive-in, and they refer to parking spaces as stalls, and in every stall on the lot there is a customer-facing digital menu board there that has some logic built into it for where the customer is in the sequence of ordering, what day part they're in, what marketing material they're seeing. There's a payment system and there's an audio system. So when you talk about the audio system or the payment system versus a typical drive-through where, you basically have one at a time coming through, you've got up to 50 at the same time. So there's a massive system for queuing calls coming in from audio, as well as for managing payment out across all of the
But you know what? Sometimes people have to be the industry leader in something. And I think of like the pizza guys, right? Most of the pizza people did not have, the big three, never really had a lot of the technology. They had to create it themselves. So the other thing that they did is pizza can be the most complex type of POS that's out there, because you've got all the different toppings and how you split up a pie, and you got to do all these different things, right? Now, you may not get into package pricing and having to piece things together like that. But when you think about the technology of what you just brought up that Sonic was doing, I could think of ways you could apply that today into, they may have done it on their own early on or had people do it for them. But today, you can take all those different parts and pieces and put them together when you're talking about the digital menu boards in front of them, the payment methods, everything in front of the guest. And then you could apply it to, I don't know, the application they're using on their phone or something. Where it's going to go.
And you said something earlier about the doing less coding than we did 15 years ago, and it's actually true. But the real unlock has been that there's so many vendors have provided such rich APIs to be able to take advantage of their functionality very, very easily, low risk.
Right.
Low risk of breaking things. That's really unlocked things that you're talking about.
And they don't charge an arm and a leg for them anymore.
Right.
In the beginning, I think there was that barrier to entry, and especially with some of the bigger systems out there, they really charged a lot for the integration or to get the API. And by the way, if they got to it, they got to it, right? But today, you will see most suppliers, especially in the POS market, they've got 140. I've tried to figure out what those 140 are, and like maybe to split them up and say they've got X number of this, X number of that, Y number of that, but they have a lot of integration, so everybody has to do it, and they don't want to do the work, so they just make it easy.
Right.
Because you need to have an intuitive standard, right?
Yeah. Well, and I mean, because you've been in the business longer than I have, but
really? That's where we're going. Okay.
Waiting in queue for a professional services group to be able to deliver something for you, and how you rank on their priority list is just a Madden experience, to your point, to both the vendor and to the customer. So yeah, being able to just expose APIs.
But the speed of change happens a lot quicker, right? So it makes it a lot easier to be able to do things, so the speed of change for the operator, for the franchisee who may need something different, or internationally. There are probably more technologies that go international right now than there were before too, because you're not limited on the hardware side.
But the eye-opener for me, stepping from Sonic as, again, one of a management team and 5,000 locations to running my own shop with 125, is you would assume, well, if you're running 125, they're not going to try to do as many things. We're not going to try to play in as many spaces.
Right.
And that is absolutely not true. When you work for a small shop, they still want to play in every one of those spaces. So
well, you have to do that because you got to compete, and it's the consumer who's driving it, right?
That's right.
Well, excuse me, it's the consumer and the employee who's driving it, because the employee, they expect you to have certain things too.
Right. So to be able to even think about playing in all of those spaces, you need to have, pretty robust integrations to be able to play.
Well, listen, let's continue on this discussion in some very specific areas, but we're going to take a break for a second, and then we'll come back and we'll focus on a few other areas that perhaps have changed since 1999 and the first FS Tech that you were at. So we'll just hang on, and then we'll continue the conversation.
Sounds good.
With the rapid expansion of technology in the food and beverage industries, finding the right supplier can become overwhelming and complicated. To simplify this process, the IFBTA created Exchange. Exchange is a powerful search tool where users can easily narrow down their technology search and refine results by application type, geography served, department, and more. Browse resources and learn more about the industry's technology suppliers at exchange.ifbta.org. Now, back to the show.
We're back, and I'm with John Doyle, who's the Chief Information Officer for Fiesta Restaurant Brands. And we're having a conversation, and we're talking about the past, but we're also sort of talking about the future. And we did cover some things like voice, and we talked about AI in there, and we talked about how maybe some POS and things have changed, and some new applications out there. We talked about a number of things. So where we left things off is we were really talking about who actually is driving change. And perhaps it's the consumer, but it also, we know we have labor, challenges in the industry, and we always have to have labor. So why don't we take a look at that? So let's start with the labor. So how have the employees and the team members changed the way that they feel and look at technology, and how we need to provide things that work for them? What is it that they want if you want to attract them to a job, with you guys?
Sure. So it's funny because the introduction of consumer technology has been somewhat of a mixed blessing, because if you turn the clock back 20 years ago, IT kind of decided how everything was going to look, and now that there's consumer technology, all of your external users, all of your internal stakeholders, everybody's some level of a technologist and has expectations about what the user experience is going to look like and about how seamless it's going to be.
But they're all users.
So yeah, in our case, I guess employees are a good example. That employees expect that they're going to be able to do things from their smartphone. They're going to be able to put in a schedule request. They're going to be able to get their schedule. They're going to be able to request a schedule change, to offer it up to coworkers. those things used to be like unlocks,
Right.
amazing employee retention devices. They're kind of table stakes now, right?
Well, so what do you think the next generation of technology is going to be for the next generation of employees? I mean, where do you see the focus?
That's a great, for employees, it's really a matter of how do you make their job easier? And there's always room there,
Right.
particularly when you talk about point of sale in terms of making an intuitive and streamlined experience that you can decrease your time to place an order. You can decrease your amount of training required to get on the system.
Right.
You can increase your upsells. You can decrease your mistakes on orders or improve your order
Well, sure,
accuracy.
you can give them,
So-
and you give them the feedback.
So
That's for
I don't know
sure.
that that's ever going to stop as UIs.
But it is easier to take a job in the industry today, right?
I'd say, although, as you know, it's a very difficult industry to work in. When you look at teenagers' employment rates, nowhere near as many teens work as did, when
All right, okay, I get
when
that.
when we were teens, everybody had a job, right? There's lots of teens that don't take
Right.
jobs. So
Well, until you get to like a Ruby Tuesday type of restaurant, you really don't, if you're working in the kitchen, it's different because you have to really understand cooking and pieces like that, even though you can get the video right up in front of you. But if you're doing quick service or fast casual, that's out there, it's a simpler type of operation. And even when you go look at the sandwich shops, the number that Jimmy John's, where they have 9 proteins, 7 proteins, I forget what it is, and everything's made on this. It became simpler. And the technologies are intuitive that when somebody uses a POS or they use their phone, you don't have to teach them how to use it because the system's built that way, right?
right. Well, and again, users are trained to understand how basic interfaces work in ways that they weren't. But other than, again, I think there's always going to be opportunity to continue improving POS. I think the big things for an employee are going to be, how do you make it easier to be an employee? So whether that's the application process, the scheduling process, and then probably
Right.
the second component is employee engagement. So we do a lot with that. We've got a new platform that we're working with that allows us to, text our employees and do employee recognition.
They are connected.
Yeah.
They are connected. The competition you have with that, that's a great point. The competition you have with that, though, is do you do that on industry-specific platforms for you, or do you do it on a Slack, or do you do it, people, in some organizations, WhatsApp, if they're international, how do you pick something without putting somebody on, forcing them to do something else, right?
So this is a great question, and I'm curious, no one else is here to answer it but you, but there was a big debate 20 years ago about whether you wanted a best of breed approach versus the one
All in
throat
one.
to choke.
Yeah.
And from my perspective, the one throat is long since out the door. That is, everything is best of breed. And part of that, again, is that integrations are available to tie together best of breed solutions. But part of it also is that whether it's your consumers or your internal business
Right.
stakeholders, nobody is willing to abide with a just good enough solution.
Well, I think that now I'm thinking about what you just said, because I actually did a podcast on this last year about best of breed versus all in one. And there isn't necessarily a right answer, but it also depends on the market segment. So if you're an independent or a multi-unit but independent, up to small to medium business, but maybe we define that up to maybe 40, 50 units, they are more likely to look at something as an all-in-one. But then once they go beyond that, and they go multi-location, they start getting into breaking up the applications. It also depends how old the brand is, because people don't want to throw away and replace, which now is going to say, well, we got a good, labor scheduling system, or we got a good POS. We don't want to throw it away, but now we need online ordering, so they throw that in overnight. So, and some of that is driven by the consumer. Because some app gets hot and that's what they want to use. And,
That's right.
And payments are a problem, across the board, or a challenge. So I'm not so sure that there is a right answer there, because you can take a look at a number of vendors that are here. Clearly, they would say yes, because clearly they offer best of breed, but they also integrate with 140 different systems.
I will allow that there is some amount of balance. And if someone has a true best of breed in one area and something that's pretty good in another area, that maybe there's a synergy there on being on a single platform. But again, more and more in my mind, I don't want to have to try to make the argument to the business of why it makes more sense from a technology perspective to have a single vendor versus letting them pick the tools that they want.
But I think that you're bringing up a very good point in this, because the other side of the coin is how people select systems in the first place. And sometimes they just show up at a show like this and they select their systems going booth to booth. Sometimes people write it down. And very infrequently do I find that people take a holistic approach to doing system selection. They always seem to buy systems in silos. And so when you're doing silos, you're going to end up with best of breed. If you're doing holistic and you have got it all mapped out of what you need, you may find that somebody has the parts and pieces that you need, and you might go one.
Well, we've come a long way in my 5 years with this company in elevating IT from an order taker to being more of a collaborative member of the strategy decision-making team, and IT being involved on the front end of these ideas. I always talk about IT being an iceberg, and there's 15% above the waterline that the business cares about and should care about, and then there's another 85 below that they should.
And then there's all the disruption that comes from it.
So, if you're talking about operating systems and on-prem versus cloud for your data center, or what's your security incident?
You care about that, but the operators don't care about that.
I'm going to make those decisions on my own.
But they should know the difference
with the CFO and the CEO. But I'm a strong believer that IT trying to drive a project is like pushing rope. It never works.
No, but IT makes good project managers.
We make good project managers, and I think
we make PMO.
We make good consultants in evaluating, technical feasibility and level of effort as you're selecting new tools. But I really try to let the business make their own decisions on the tools.
By the way, I would challenge you on something here, because I'm now putting together the timeline. You told us that you joined and you're doing this right before COVID.
That's right.
Right? So is it possible that seat at the table and some of these other things changed, and the value of IT changed because of COVID, and it saved the life of organizations? So did that maybe just happen because of, an unfortunate circumstance that forced it?
I think that we were slowly moving the needle in that direction, yes. To be honest, the bigger thing for me in this situation was we had a change in the CEO seat. The new CEO was our previous CFO, who I'd already reported to for 3 years. I'd already built a relationship with, and is just in general a more collaborative.
Well, finance people understand tech,
but he's more of a collaborative leader. And every leader has their own management style. So it was a natural fit for his style.
Well, listen,
it's been good for the business.
I had somebody once say to me that, life would be easy if it wasn't for employees and customers. So let's focus on the customer side. And if we take a look at the consumer preferences and what they want, and we know that consumers are driving technology as well, and sometimes we don't move as fast as the consumers do, where do you see the consumer fitting in now and as we go forward?
Right. Well, there are things that the consumers are explicitly asking for, and there are things that the consumers are maybe even subconsciously reacting to, but that are real drivers in the business. So there's some of both. So obviously, do you have to have an online presence? Do you have to be able to take an order from their smartphone? Do you have to be able to take, Apple Pay and Google Pay and modern forms of payment? Yes, those things they're explicitly asking for.
But it's also generational.
But
There's
to me,
6 generations, right? So.
This is great, because when I started at Sonic, which has been almost 10 years ago, Cliff Hudson was our CEO, who's a transformational leader. He really saw it then, that he used to say explicitly, technology is what's going to drive the next generation of sales growth for us.
Absolutely.
And it is so true.
And they're connected.
Right. So in that regard, when you look at how consumers respond to loyalty and individualized marketing, they may not be explicitly asking for it, but if you're analyzing your data, it's what they're reacting to, and it's critical.
Well, I do want to, wrap up with a couple of just thoughts because of where we are sitting at the time, right? So, besides the fact you live locally, so this was an easy one, to come to, what is it that you're coming to this year's FS Tech sort of either expecting to see or anticipating, or something that got you excited that I really want to go because of something?
Well, I get it's two things for me, and one of them is really just keeping an eye on the cutting edge technologies and which ones are becoming ready for prime
Right.
time. And we talked about voice AI specifically in the drive-through channel earlier is a perfect example that, because again, we're only 125 restaurants. We can't afford to be bleeding edge on that space.
Exactly.
But we need to be fast followers. The second that it's business ready,
Fast followers.
we need to be adopting it. And then the other thing for me is, in the last 11 months, we've gone from a publicly traded company to being under the umbrella of a private equity group that is still very aggressively growth oriented, but the growth orientation becomes more across their entire portfolio, and our particular brand could potentially be more of a cash generator than a growth vehicle. So in that regard, then it really becomes important for us to be continually improving margins.
Right, but you do get to compare and leverage across multiple brands, that also helps you to accelerate, different things.
And it's somewhat incumbent on being a CIO anyway, that you have to continually have your eye on reducing complexity, sunsetting legacy applications, eliminating duplicative systems. So all of that's very much top of mind for me. And we've re-platformed a lot of major tools here within the last year. We re-platformed our loyalty program, our gift card program, our BI platform. And a lot of those things are
to give yourself a foundation to grow in the future.
Yeah, and the funny
data's
thing
everything.
But there's a margin play on it also, because not only are legacy applications less agile, often they have a less valid financial argument to be made for them. And I mean, I can make a great example of one of our security tools that I'm replacing, that we found a new tool that's significantly more full featured. It's going to provide us with a true single pane of glass across a dozen different security systems, and it's going to cost less than the one single system.
That's the way that it always works, right?
So anyway, I'm just looking for where the opportunities are.
All right, so just a personal question in tech, of course, because we're talking about tech, right? So as a personal question, what are you looking forward in personal tech, in the next 6 to 12 months?
Personal tech?
Is there something you just have been waiting, you just can't wait to see what happens with it? Maybe you've been reading about it?
Well, I'll say it's already happened. So I'm in the process of culling my herd. So I had 10 guitars and 3 amps. And I've decided as I'm aging and moving into smaller homes now that I'm an empty nester, that I need to cull the herd. So I'm in the process of collapsing from 10 to 5 guitars and from 3 to 1 amp. So I got a new amp that's tech enabled, that has a full Bluetooth capability that gives you the ability to drive everything from your smartphone, as well as download patches for new sounds that don't even exist yet on the amp.
Okay, so you're going to consolidate with tech. Wasn't expecting that answer, but makes a lot of sense. So if we look at history, I don't play the guitar, but just trying to make sure I got this one straight. How many guitars do you have that you're consolidating?
I had 10. I've already sold to 5. I'm going to 5.
Okay, you're going to 5. The question is, even if you went to 1 in the next few years, is it possible, like, what was it, the Moog synthesizer or whatever that was that came out, right? And you had what was the name of that band that was using it? I remember this. It was all instrumental, but they were able to recreate any sound.
Okay.
Or a keyboard that can recreate multiple instruments and sound. So do you see yourself at some point here going to 1 guitar and just, today we want to have this guitar and tomorrow we want to have that one, and just changing it that way?
I don't. I'm a purist. I'm always going to have it. I have a guitar my mom left me that's priceless. I can never get rid of it. I'm going to have 1 nylon string classical style. I'm going to have 1 steel string acoustic, and then I'm going to have 2 electrics, one with humbuckers and one with single
And so
coils.
you
If
are
that
of
means
the
anything
belief,
to you.
it doesn't, but you are of the belief that people will know the difference.
Yes, and I will know the difference. It's funny. So you're not a guitar player. Depending on the guitar you pick up, you want to play completely different music. Completely
Really?
different.
Well, you have to have the talent to do that. So,
I'm a hack.
that's a hack, a hack. And that is a great way to conclude today, because as a hack, and we won't even get into hacking technology or something like that, but I got that. That's probably why you're in one or the other. So, John, it's been a pleasure, speaking and having a conversation with you. You probably pulled the wrong straw here, because you got the beginning of FS Tech, and at the end, maybe we should compare notes or something like that. But it's been a pleasure to have John Doyle, who's the Chief Information Officer of Fiesta Restaurant Group, and an old friend, get together today at FS Tech as it gets started in Dallas. So thank you.
Thank you.
This podcast is brought to you by the International Food and Beverage Technology Association. The IFPTA is the industry's voice of food service, hospitality, and retail technology, all put together. We provide thought leadership as your single, impartial, and go-to resource. The IFPTA offers in-person and online communities to connect with your peers, the exchange and all-encompassing global technology resource, and an industry-wide professional education and certification program. The bottom line is the IFPTA is your place to gather, learn, and share in conversations like the one we're having today. So thank you for joining us on this episode of Tech Bites powered by the IFPTA. I'm Rob Grimes, your host, and I look forward to taking our next bite of technology together.